Hi, folks. Hope you are okay. Look to everybody out there. It's good to be with you. May God bless you. We're just going to look at Tertullian, one of the early church fathers, and we're just going to consider his life, a few things about his life, and yeah, just for a few minutes. So I hope it's a blessing to you. Um, I hope you enjoyed the street preaching videos of Off the Curb Ministries. I was out with Joe Kirby, who runs Off the Curb Ministries, a few days ago. So I hope you enjoyed those videos. Um, I have some big announcements, some news to give in the next week or so, or the next couple of days. So watch out for the big announcements. So yeah, let's go into Tertullian. Um, Tertullian, or known, his full name is Quintus Septimus Florens Tertullianus, and he lived from 155 AD to round about 220 AD. He was an early Christian writer. He was from Carthage, which is a province of a Roman province of Africa. He was a major pioneer, Christian author in Latin Christian literature, and was known as a Christian apologist and a polemicist, defending Christianity as a polemicist and defending Christianity against heresy, particularly Gnosticism. He wrote in Latin, and he is called the father of Latin Christianity, or the founder of Western theology. He's the one who introduced the word Trinity into the theological language, or the Latin is Trinitas. Tertullian developed theological concepts and advanced the development of early church doctrine. He did have a subordinationist doctrine of the Son of God and the Spirit to the Father, which was not accepted by the church later. Jerome, the church father, said that Tertullian joined the Montanist sect and even suggested he may have apostatized, but that's in dispute. There's very little reliable source regarding Tertullian's life. Most knowledge comes from the various prefaces or various references from his writings. Roman Africa was famous place for orators, and the influence can be seen in the writing style of Tertullian. He has the various styles of the orators of that time. He had a very passionate temper, and most scholars or would say that he had a very fiery kind of temper. Um, he was like a bull in a china shop when it came to his polemics. He was a scholar with a top education, and he knew Greek extremely well, and he wrote books in Greek, although we don't have those books that he wrote in Greek. Um, Ancient accounts say that he was a trained lawyer and ordained priest. That comes from Eusebius of Caesarea in Church History, chapter 2, part 2, verse 4, and in Jerome's on famous men in chapter 53. He also has many legal analogies in his writings, so that um, makes people think that he was a um, a lawyer. His conversion to Christianity took place around about 197 to 198. In his middle life, about 207, he was attracted to the new prophecy of Montanism, but most scholars reject the assertion that Tertullian left the mainstream church or was excommunicated. We are left to ask whether Saint Cyprian could have regarded Tertullian as his master if Tertullian had been a notorious schismatic, since no ancient writing was more definite, if not indeed fanatical, on the subject of schism than Saint Cyprian. The question must surely be answered in the negative. In the time of Augustine, a group of Tertullianists still had a basilica in Carthage, which within the same period passed to the Orthodox Church. It is unclear whether the name was merely another for the North American Montanist or that it means that Tertullian later split with the Montanists. Jerome says that Tertullian lived to an old age. By the doctrinal works he published, Tertullian became the teacher of Cyprian and the predecessor of Augustine in key Western theology. 31 works he wrote, together with fragments of more. Some 15 works in Latin or Greek are lost, some as recently as the 9th century. Um, sort of manuscripts were found. Tertullian's writings cover the whole theological field of apologetics against paganism, Judaism, polemics, polity, discipline, morals. Um, from the doctrine of God, Tertullian reserves the appellation God in the sense of the ultimate originator of all things to the Father, who made the world out of nothing through his Son, the Word, as corporeity, though he is a spirit. However, Tertullian used corporal only in a Stoic sense to mean something with actual material existence rather than the later idea of flesh. Now, we could go into a lot more detail, but I'm just going to, off the cuff, say some things now about Tertullian. Number one, Tertullian, when he got involved with the Montanists, there was two women who joined it. They left their husbands and they got involved in these prophecies. And Tertullian joined these women, and it was very ascetic. It was very exciting. They were saying these crazy prophecies, and Tertullian got involved in that. And these women left their husbands. Um, and Tertullian supported these Montanists, this kind of early charismatic group. He supported them in his polemics, in his writings. Secondly, he wrote against a group, not just the Gnostics. He wrote against a group which we would call the modalists. Modalism is the idea that there's only one person in the Godhead, and that appears in three modes. So we often use that illustration to defend the Trinity, which is not a very good illustration. We often say that the Trinity is like water. Water can be ice, it can be vapor, but actually that's modalism. Modalism is the idea that the one person, God, appears in different modes. That's not orthodoxy, that's not what the Trinity is. The Trinity is of one substance. And this is a word that Tertullian uses. He uses this idea that God is one substance, and he also uses the idea that there are three persons in the substance, where modalists would say, no, there's one person and he appears in three different ways, three modes. So Tertullian was dealing with this kind of modalism. And in dealing with this modalism, he was a bit unwise and he hadn't fully worked out the doctrine of the Trinity fully. So there was this subordinationism where the Son is subordinate to the Father. Um, but to be fair, he does emphasize from time to time in his book Against Praxis, that the persons share the same substance, but his language can be make it seem as if the Son is inferior to the Father. But in reality, he does say that the Son has all the attributes of Godhead that the Father has. So he's a bit unwise, but he did push the boundaries in and help the church to defend the Trinity with the language of substance and with the language of persons, which were intellectual tools that helped the church later on to thrash out against heresies against the Trinity. So you have this element of these Montanists that he was involved with, where they were hypercharismatics. You have his defense, particularly against the modalist, where he emphasized the one substance of Godhead and the three persons, but did slip into a very kind of subordinate understanding of the Trinity, which seemed to make the Son inferior, which was a bit unwise. And then, thirdly, there was a massive emphasis by Tertullian on asceticism, where he advised that people should not be allowed, should not go to any games, they should not go to theatre, um, that if you do a mortal sin, you can't be forgiven. If you lapse, if you kind of fall away because of persecution, you can't be restored. He kind of became very, very strict, very, very strict, and it was kind of like, in a way, a form of Phariseeism, really. Now you can understand the context in the Roman era. The games would not have been nice, would they? They would have been the gladiators. The various entertainment places were all covered in sexual innuendo and sexual malpractice. So you can understand him trying to warn Christians to get involved in the world. But it is safe to say that even though he had that pastoral concern and there is some gravitas to that, there was also the issue that he did overstep the mark, he did go over the top. Um, So Tertullian is very important in the development of the doctrine of the Trinity. Now we could go into detail, we could go into in depth in it, but I'm just giving you a little taster of Tertullian. Um, so what are the lessons that we learn about Tertullian? Well, first of all, what we learn, the other thing about Tertullian is he was apparently probably one of the most what can I say, uh, combative characters the church has ever produced. He said, and his attitude and the way he said it was quite combative to the point of being extremely rude, to be honest. So, what do we learn from Tertullian? Well, number one, he was valiant for truth. He was a man passionate about the truth of God and to stand up. Number two, um, he lacked discernment when it came to these Montanist prophets. I mean, these two women would be prophesying all the time that left the church, left their husbands to be prophetesses. And you'd think Tertullian would have the sense to say, well, where's that in the Bible where you can just leave your husbands and do this kind of thing? So there's a contradiction there. He wants this asceticism, but he doesn't challenge these prophetess women about leaving their husbands. But at the same time, he he lack discernment concerning these women. So we have to be careful. We have to be discerning when people bring these things to us, these prophecies and things like that. Secondly, um, Tertullian, um, we can learn that from Tertullian that we thank the Lord that God raised him up because God used him to help us to understand the Trinity. And we need to appreciate Tertullian. Yeah, he wasn't perfect. Yes, he was a bit extreme in some areas, but God can use the most unlikely of characters, and God used Tertullian to help the church defend and understand the Trinity for future generations. And then thirdly, the third lesson we can learn is to not overreact. That Tertullian overreacted against the world to the point where it was more, he slipped into Phariseeism, where it can be very judgmental of people, and we can very easily overreact to and try to be get people to be holy by putting rules and regulations on them that really don't have any biblical warrant. It's just our own opinion, and we're being forceful, and that's not of God. And Tertullian slipped into that. Although he had good motives, he still was unbalanced in that area. So those are some things that we can learn from Tertullian. Tertullian is not an easy read. Against Praxis is a very, very difficult read. It's not for the faint-hearted. And that's a little bit about Tertullian. He was married, but he saw being a virgin was of the highest, uh, was of a higher, being a eunuch was of a higher class than, say, someone married. Um, yeah, so those are some things about Tertullian. I hope that's blessed you. I hope that's encouraged you. So go and Google Tertullian, read about him, study his works if you get a chance. And he was a massive intellect, and he was a gift to the church, and we owe him a great debt. Some people might say, well, he wasn't a Christian because he was so involved in censoring people for going to theatre or things like that. But we don't know his heart. But he definitely wanted to defend the truth, and he wanted to uphold Christ. That's as clear as day. So that's it, folks. So God bless you, and I hope what I've shared with you will encourage you to read about Tertullian. I hope it's informed you a little bit about this church father, and may God bless you. And good night. Take care now. God bless.